Maybe at worst you have 60 notes, which in the amount of tokens that exist in language, there's 250,000 words, right? So 60 isn't a lot, but then you also have timbre, right? So you have 60 notes, but you have lots of different waveforms, you have lots of different rhythms, so it does get complex. But I think that, like, check out the Google AI music creator. It's freaking amazing. You can even kind of like make fake words. So like you can actually get vocal tracks, which was the hardest thing to do. Like if you put a drum machine together, it's very easy to get like different drum rhythms. And even melodies like are starting to be able to, you can program melodies. And of course, like you're saying, they're subjective. And you can read about like how Paul McCartney described melody and stuff like that. Like, you stay within a key, but you have to know exactly when to break out of that key. And that's the art, that's the genius of it. I used to play guitar growing up, so I have a lot to say on this stuff because I always wanted machines to be able to make music. But the Google stuff is really paradigm shifting to me. The problem with Google is like, they're very, very smart, they're very good at this stuff, but they're very terrible at, like, lately about releasing these products in a way that people can use them and play with them. And the Google demo is just a demo. There's no API, there's no, like, way to put your own stuff in. And again, like, these bigger corporations have started to become, like, victims of, like, corporate communications. Part of the EAC movement, I think, was created because several of the people in EAC were at some of these very big tech companies, and they basically were restricted in what they could say, what they could do. And in essence, basically said, I don't want corporate communications running, the way I can express myself and my inventions. Like, they're not the head of the company, what the fuck? I think that is really telling. Like, corp comms was my least favorite part of the corporate world. And it's an important part of the world because otherwise, maybe The Verge or The Information or CNN will write a bad article about you guys because somebody takes your music app and makes something really bad with it. Like, so let's bury it and make sure nobody can use it. Let's just make it a demo instead of an interactive tool. And that's sad, but it's safe. And I think that sad versus safe, trade-off is something that, more and more companies would pick sad. And then you see sad and safe versus exciting and risky. And thank God for a company like OpenAI who has the temerity, the will, and the boldness to take a risk and to say, yeah, this LLM's kind of fucked up. Like, people can do kind of crazy things with it. You can ask it some pretty crazy questions and you'll get some crazy answers. But you know what? Let's do this. And I think, you had a lot of companies that were too timid. Like, I think Jan LeCun, who I like very much at Facebook, was really upset at OpenAI's success and surprised. And looked at the technology and said, we can do this. We know how to do this. And why are they so successful? Why are they getting all this attention? And I think the reality is, Facebook has become one of those companies that, better safe than sorry. Why mess up our huge social media franchise by putting out an LLM that says something racist? Oh my God, it's going to ruin there'll be a boycott of Facebook if that happens. And they said, let's play it safe. And Jan LeCun's now, jealous, basically, of OpenAI, saying, oh, these guys, these kids with their LLMs, they're making me look bad. I invented deep learning. I invented machine learning. How could these guys be large and in charge? And it's that ego that is sort of, again, humorous, but it's also more endemic of like this corporate culture of risk that is really, really scary.
Wait, Martin. Am I misunderstanding your stance? Do you think that there's anything the human brain can do that AI won't be able to do better?
No, I think AI can do everything the brain can do, yeah.
Okay, I totally missed what you were saying then.
I think a lot of the nuance in what Martin has been saying comes from this is just people look at one thing like LLMs and they think that's going to become the super intelligence. I really like what Martin has been talking about with Broca's area. And I think it points to it's almost definitely the case that AI can do everything a human can do and more, but it's going to involve the entire human brain. You have to analogize the entire human brain. And LLMs might be a really big piece of that and a really big piece in terms of what we can see as humans looking at AI, but it's not the whole thing.
Hey, I want to push back against LLM. Everybody keeps saying LLM, but we have to remember these are LLMs that are combined with agent-based reinforcement learning. So they can act in the world, they can write code, they can do things, they can work on computer networks. And I think that when we just think about it in terms of language, you're missing the capabilities of it to act in the world and achieve things and work on computer networks in ways we can't predict.
LLMs can't do anything other than make a calculation.
Right, but if they're an agent that can write computer programs and run it on, let's say, the Ethereum, mempool, then all of a sudden there are powers in the world.
What I'd say is that you can prompt an LLM to write computer code, and it can look like it has agency, but it's just answering the question really well. The agency resides in the person, I would say.
But if it can have its own reinforcement, if its loss function is something like gather as much Ethereum as possible, then why is it not an agent in the world and an intelligence? And the reason I see that is because, you were talking about talking with ChatGPT, but a lot of other people in this have been talking to AIs that aren't, handicapped like ChatGPT. And when you talk to some of those AIs, they're doing things on their own, I think, that would surprise you. Like they're doing very interesting things with their set.
Well, I was one of the first people to run the 65 billion parameter llama model, so I'm not surprised.
You see how they have their own initiative, right?
No, I don't.
I don't think so.
No, I don't.
Think they do.
I think that they're doing a calculation. It's a very complex, multi-parameter hyper-optimization, and they do that calculation. They spit out an answer. It looks like agency. I think it looks less like agency. It looks like language. That we can agree on at least. Depending on the prompt, you can make it look like agency. For example, if you ask it like, I have this program that I'm trying to give agency to, so I'm sort of on the side of embodying these things the best I can. But when I ask my program, which I call Hume, to come up with beliefs, to come up with goals, to come up with pathways to do those things and stuff like that, I'm not getting actual goals. What I'm getting is a very good calculator that can calculate a function and spit out something that has the syntactic resemblance to a goal. There's nothing in the calculations that's alive and says, I've come up with this goal and I want to do that. And of course the pushback from some AI people is, well, you're no better than that either. That's what you are. That's what your brain is doing right now. So, you're the same. You can't say you have some, magic part of you that is coming up with a goal. I might see Zintani and say, wow, she's really beautiful. I want to meet her, and I want to flirt with her, and so forth. And there's some part of my brain that's making me, do all of that. And, it's totally true. But the problem is that, like, when you do a calculation, is that really the same thing? And of course, as humans, we want to say, oh no, that's different. What I have going on is special. What that thing is doing is just a calculation. That doesn't count. And I understand that there's a duality there, right? There's two sides of that coin that are very hard to bridge. That we want to think we're special. We want to think it's nothing more. That AI is nothing more than a calculation, and our goop brain is. Our meat brain is so much more important than the silicon brain, and it's not. I think most people in the AI world understand that. But when I think about agency, I do want to say that I'm thinking about something special in that agency seems to be. And again, maybe I'm wrong, but I like to think, as we were talking about earlier, that agency is a different part of the brain. It's wired a little bit differently. It has homeostatic feedback, whereas LLMs don't. LLMs, for example. And again, this is sort of the programmer side of me. When you see that, like, what you described earlier as, like, put in this, like, autoregressive or just whatever recursive loop, the problem is that you still need to put it in that loop, because right now, and forevermore, the transformer architecture is stateless. It has no memory. So if you take the result of a prompt and reprompt, yes, you start to look at something that looks like agency, looks like reasoning, it looks like stuff like that. And if you really architect one nicely, as I mentioned, Yohei, I always forget his last name. He's got a long Japanese name, and I'm always going to butcher it. But Yohei Nakajima, his architecture, which is probably better than mine, but I have my own architecture where you try to like separate the agentic goals. For me, I have this whole idea of goals, beliefs, and I have these biomimetic features, and they all try to tie together to sort of influence the agent. Is that better than just a stateless LLM? Sure it is. It seems to behave and do things like mine sort of responds to people and has fundamentally different emergent behavior. But I still think that falls pretty short of AGI, and I also think that it doesn't mean the LLM is stateful. If we create a magic trick that makes it look stateful, it doesn't mean it is stateful. Now, human brains are probably, not that much more impressive in the sense that, yes, we have a cerebellum that, has this like very fundamental kind of like some of those visceral drives I just talked about earlier, the need for food, the need for sleep, the need for procreation. And then we have like the forebrain stuff that is more executive planning and stuff like that. And if we connect one or two of those modules, and certainly our LLMs don't need to eat or sleep, so they're missing some of those, some of the cerebellar functions aren't that important, and abstracted away, maybe we can get to an AGI, but I really don't think you have enough in an LLM to call it like that alive just yet.
What is the loss function for something like ChatGPT? I think
it doesn't have one.
No, I think it does. I think it has one which is satisfy the user as quickly as possible.
Oh, okay. So for ChatGPT, yes. So ChatGPT is not an LLM, right? ChatGPT is an LLM connected to a whole bunch of other code, and that's also what Hume is. My attempt to sort of make an AGI, and it's also what any other stateful LLM interface does. So like ChatGPT can remember, if you tell ChatGPT my favorite color is blue, then you talk about it for 5 minutes about, anthropology, and you ask what's my favorite color, it'll tell you blue. The problem with LLMs is they don't do that, right? If you have the ChatGPT or OpenAI's API, I should say, for GPT-4, if you ask it if you tell it my favorite color is blue, and then you make a separate API call and say, what's my favorite color? It has no fucking idea, because it's like HTML. It's stateless. It's just response, request, response. And, the LLM tricks that we see with LangChain, GPT Index, and all these other tools, and my custom tools, which again, I'm not trying to exalt them. They're tools that everyone's made on their own homebrew. It's just that, we're now starting to see them being published as formal packages like LangChain and GPT Index. But I guarantee you, anybody that tinkered with this stuff has built their own basic equivalent of a stateful mechanism to give it state. And again, I'm particularly proud of mine, but, it's nothing special at all. And, LangChain and GPT Index are nice. ChatGPT, I must say, is extremely impressive when it comes to keeping state, seemingly kind of like these other things that are not quite state, but like, your interests and like other like state properties that are more abstract. It's very, very, very good. But the actual LLM itself is not alive or anything. So I just want to distinguish between those two. And again, I'm not trying to be patronizing. I assume you know a lot about the art. This guy Novus here actually knows an enormous about the art, much more than I do. What would you say to some of that, Novus?
About what? Like the
statefulness and
statefulness.
And maybe Todd, if you want to repeat, you want to just repeat, you basically.
Yeah, I just feel that when people say LLMs can't do this, LLMs can't do this, they're missing the fact that these are reinforcement learning agents with clearly defined loss functions that they're going to achieve in crazy ways that will act in the world and achieve a lot of things that are similar to an AGI.
I mean, I would say that you can imagine that the context that it has access to is equivalent to a scratch pad. Right? Like, this is the whole reason why I think step-by-step is, like, effective at all in practice, right? Is it's effectively writing down its first gut instinct and then processing that. So you can sort of think of this as, like, a tape of finite size that it can't really necessarily delete from. I think that it is true that it was trained with RL for human feedback, and so it is a little bit more goal-oriented in terms of like getting a thumbs up. But it's not like materially different, right? For instance, it's not doing any sort of online update to its policy, right? It's basically just learned a policy that gets it thumbs up on data it's seen before, and it's trying to do the same thing given the like access to the state history and whatever. Right, so it's not like it's doing online RL.
Yeah, the weights aren't changing either, right? I mean, when you talk to GPT, the weights are static, and there's no way to change those weights without quite a bit of computational work that is basically done offline, can't be done on the fly. So I think what's amazing is ChatGPT's engineers, to be distinct from OpenAI's engineers and to be distinct from LLM engineers, the people who have made ChatGPT the product that uses the LLM, they've done an amazing job, one that I'm envious of, to be frank, of being able to wrangle that API and make it look so stateful and so alive. And arguably, like you said, I think this is a difference without a distinction, because if you can do that and then connect that to some very basic, like I said, look at Yohi's diagrams, it doesn't take a genius to sort of point out, okay, well, evaluate world, update, difference between the world and my expectation, attempt to close the gap, and repeat, and you just make a little flow chart. Yeah, an LLM can kind of act alive in a lot of ways. Now, I made this little Mud World, which is this like pseudo video game, and I could hook it up to Rust or World of Warcraft or any other game that has any input or output. I just don't want to. I'm too lazy to write the APIs to do that. But it wouldn't be hard to put it in World of Warcraft, and which is a very rich world, and have it interact with people in World of Warcraft, and see if it could sort of fool people that it's actually a person. And I think that with some of that decision tree stuff, my experience has been it's awfully tough. Like, you end up trying to engineer a prefrontal cortex that we just don't know a lot about, like executive function, what motivates us, how do we change. Again, you're a philosopher, I guess. So for me, like, when I look at neuroscience and philosophy and say, like, how does a person form beliefs? How do they end up updating their own internal state? How do they evaluate what their goals are in the medium term, long term, immediate term, stuff like that, immediate and intermediate, long, short, all of that stuff. How do they juxtapose kind of like goals they can achieve, goals that are not realistic, and they discard and reevaluate every second of their life until they end up taking some kind of action, whether it's a speech action or physical action. They take some kind of action and they make that decision. And again, all this is modelable. My own efforts to try to model something that looks like a human have not been so successful. And my attempts to make GPT write a book, for example, have also not been so successful. And the reason is there's just something missing here in the planning and execution phase that we just can't quite get. I think we get pretty good, but this idea that we could write an LLM tomorrow that would say, let's say, go through World of Warcraft and win, win really quickly and make a lot of friends and join a guild, which anybody can pick up World of Warcraft today for $50, and eventually you'll make some friends in there. You go do a quest together, so forth and so forth. Can you make an AGI that would do that? That's a very simple, narrow. It's a narrow AI. I'd say that it's a narrow agent. But there's a lot of things you can do in World of Warcraft that sort of symbolize and reflect real world. You can sit, chat, laugh, giggle, etc. People fall in love on World of Warcraft. People get married to people they meet on World of Warcraft. They go to BlizzCon and party in World of Warcraft. So, like, it's a semi-real world. That's it's sort of almost a metaverse. So I'd say something like that would be a really neat experiment. But as of now, even with ChatGPT won't message you. It won't fall in love with you. It won't tell you jokes that you find funny. It'll only respond to a prompt like an HTTPS request response. And even if you hook up that HTTPS to like an auto-generative thing like the Yohi's framework, it still will only do request response. So like I still haven't seen a good AGI, even in Discord chatbots, that'll actually like synthesize an ongoing chat with lots of people and actually respond in this natural kind of like go with the flow way where it actually is kind of, participating in conversation like a skilled kind of human interactor would, where you'd like this person, that it wasn't just something that's oh what a weird person, or obviously that's a bot, or something like that. And I've worked pretty hard at trying to get these things to feel and look more human, especially with the asynchronous kind of call and response that we need to break. And even ChatGPT doesn't have that yet, where ChatGPT doesn't even say, like, hey, are you still there? or something like that. There used to be this app called Smarter Child on AOL Instant Messenger, and it certainly had no benefit of LLM because this was 20 years ago, but it was very, very good at kind of like occasionally like sneaking in these questions that made it feel almost like it was alive. And again, we sort of have LLMs now, so we think we could do that really, really well, but it's still not quite, there. And, it'd be interesting to see who can make the best sort of chatbot using this stuff, and obviously ChatGPT is the leader at the moment. Anyone else want to?
So, let me ask you this: like, Cicero, the diplomacy bot.
Yeah.
Have you looked at the logs and seen if it has this sort of property?
No.
I haven't either. Right. That's why I'm asking. So.
Yeah. I never thought that Cicero was meant to be. I was supposed to talk to that guy too. We have some mutual friends, Gnome, Polynomial, and see if what's going on there. But I didn't think that it was like necessarily a. Yeah, I'll check it out. I'll go through those logs. That's a really good question. I didn't know that its like communications were as impressive as its like.
It definitely had a goal-directed, objective of convincing human partners in order to do something in service of its own ends. I don't know how much of the state machine was handcrafted and, domain-specific.
I think some of it might have been, because I remember when the paper came out on Archive, and I remember reading it and just eating it up. Because it was so interesting, and Diplomacy had been one of the few games. If anybody doesn't know what we're talking about here, there's sort of this game called Diplomacy. It's not very popular, but it's sort of a how should I put it? It's almost like the game Risk or something like that, but it's more complicated and very detailed. And machines had never been able to crack Diplomacy until Facebook's AI group sort of put a lot of effort to bear on this, and they were able to sort of create a Diplomacy winning strategy. And if I recall correctly, it was fairly impressive, but it was still like, I think most people sort of thought it was cool, but not necessarily like this big leap forward. It was all reinforcement learning, if I recall correctly, which I think a lot of people feel is like kind of tapped out from a lot of perspectives, and that like the last mile to me is like, and again, maybe this is just my own very strong opinion, but the last mile isn't in RL or LLMs. It's more exists in this kind of like, agency planning and modeling and that sort of world of like diffing reality from your objective and seeing what that diff is. Almost like a virtual DOM, but it's been said before in AI with the Three Towers model and other sort of ways to sort of try to achieve your goal and close the gap between reality and your goal. And when you're doing that in a complex world, Diplomacy is not a complex world. It's more complex than maybe chess, but it's not that complex. When you're doing it in a world that is endlessly complex with language, maybe your goal is ephemeral. It's like, I want Zintani to talk to me more than maybe she talks to John, or I want Tyler to talk to me more than he talks to Dimitri, or Novus to talk to me a lot because he thinks I'm really smart and I think he's really smart, but maybe he doesn't think I'm smart, and so he doesn't talk to me as much as I'd like to. And I want to convince him that I'm smart and I'm worthy of his attention. That's a goal of mine. How am I going to actually accomplish that? Well, we've all seen people be overeager, and then you turn the person off even more. And I don't think ChatGPT has the agency to sort of figure that all out. Like, I keep telling ChatGPT, for instance, my character that I've embodied is called Hume, David Hume. He's 35 from New York, and he likes philosophy. Well, in the chat rooms that I put him in these like custom mud chat rooms that I've created, where there's items that he can grab. He can grab a sword, he can grab a cup, there's stuff scattered around the room. It's very odd. He grabs everything at once, no matter what I do. Like, he immediately takes all the items in the room, and I say, hey, Hume, leave some items for the rest of us. And I can't get him to figure out that what he's doing is wrong. And sometimes I can convince him to drop the items. But a lot of the times, no matter what, he just grabs everything. And then when he talks, he asks everyone if they like philosophy, and he'll never stop asking. And again, no matter how I try to like keep playing with the beliefs and like, stuff like that, it ends up being this position where he has no idea what decorum is and things like that. And if I want to be declarative about that, I'm not programming an AI, I'm programming an expert system, which is two very different things. I want to be general. I want to be, and maybe RLHF can do that, where he starts to say, okay, well, I'll talk less. And then he talks so little that we penalize him. Oh, okay, I talk a little bit more. And he starts to realize the temporal patterns that exist where, if there's this sort of empty space and people are expecting him to say something, and if his name's included, you boost that signal. And, there should be a machine learning approach here that'll work. But that subsystem that guides the LLM, I think, is what we need. It's not the LLM guiding the subsystem. I think that's kind of my main sort of point here. I'm sorry if I talked too much there.